dollar. Dirt and money, no soul. Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my foes. Dollar. Please tell me you can hear me. Don't turn your back and don't neglect me. Just let me know if you need me. Dollar. Let me watch out for my partners. Keep my money long, get my team strong. Let me run away from my problems.
Yup, what's good, original crew? It's your boy DJ New Kid, your girl
Sierra Nicole.
back on the channel. More Mr. Ballen. We got Dead Man's Riddle still haunts the Federal Bureau of Investigation, what y'all might know as the FBI.
So extra.
Hey, extra, that's what it stands for.
Yeah, but we could have
But y'all be so lazy. FBI. No.
The FBI.
Put some respect, man. Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Child, I ain't know about saying that. Oh, the FBI.
Alright, so we just gonna call y'all by y'all abbreviated names then.
Who is
CND.
That's fine. I used to write that on a lot of stuff just to call me. Yep. What's up?
CND. I'm call 3. You got everybody. Well, not everybody.
Right. Not everybody.
Some of y'all only got 2, so we're gonna disrespect you on the call you 2. If you got like Terrell Owens, that was his own T.O. Well, he liked it. Michael Jordan, MJ, he liked it.
Yeah, so what you trying to say?
But I'm gonna say MJJ because Michael Jeffrey Jordan, MJJ. With that being said, man, make sure y'all check out the links in the description box.
It's down below.
You already know where to go, man. For the first support, all you gotta do is check out down below. Also, if you enjoyed today's video,
like it with a thumbs up.
Facts, man. Let's go ahead and get into it. Let's check it out. Let's see what this story's about, man. Roll it, Ballen. I don't want to hear no BS.
Did you know that the FBI has a world-class code-breaking team? Basically, their job is to decode any encrypted evidence. So imagine coming across a piece of evidence that appears to have secret messages embedded inside of it. It's the job of these brainiacs on the decoding team to go in there and figure out what those secret messages are. Now, this decoding team is incredibly good. But periodically, they do run into riddles, if you will, that are just way too difficult and they can't figure them out. And when this happens, they will often appeal to the public and say, hey, anyone out there, if you can solve this riddle, let us know. And so today's story will involve one of those types of impossible riddles. And if you stay till the end of the video, you'll actually see the mystifying evidence. And I'll show you where you need to go online to literally help the FBI solve this riddle. But before we get into that story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you've come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload once a week. So, if that's of interest to you, the next time the like button takes their full kitchen trash bag out to go out to the dumpster, immediately throw an open container of clam chowder into their empty can before they can come back and put a new bag in. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. Okay, let's get into today's story. At around 5 o'clock in the evening on June 25th, 1999, a man named Ricky McCormick stumbled into an emergency room in St. Louis, Missouri, with his hand over his chest, complaining that he couldn't breathe. He said he had asthma, and earlier that day he had been cutting the grass, and so maybe that had caused a flare-up. But either way, here he was in a lot of discomfort saying, I need help. Ricky was 41 years old, and for his whole life, he had had heart and lung problems, and so him arriving in this state in the ER was actually not all that uncommon for him. And so this hospital did what they did with anyone who came in complaining that they couldn't breathe. They immediately took Ricky to a back exam room and they hooked him up to all these monitors to make sure his heartbeat was steady and that his oxygen levels were plenty high. And once Ricky was in the exam room getting hooked up, he started acting really agitated and he kept looking around the room like he was scared that someone was going to jump out at him. And he was also sweating profusely, and whenever he did speak, he spoke so quickly no one could really understand him. But despite Ricky's odd behavior, the heart monitor showed his heart was beating steadily, his oxygen levels were perfectly fine, and when the doctor came in and examined Ricky, even though he clearly saw that something was off about Ricky, there wasn't any sign that there was anything physically wrong with Ricky. And so the doctor and the nurses agreed that whatever was going on with Ricky had to be psychological. And as it happened, Ricky did have a long history of psychological issues. He was known for making things up all the time, just telling people these crazy stories about himself, like how he was this talented singer and he was about to go on tour, or that he was actually a prince, or that he was studying to be a doctor. I mean, things that nobody thought was true, but Ricky would say as if this is just common knowledge. This is who I am. And so Ricky's family for the longest time had just assumed that Ricky was either bipolar or maybe schizophrenic. Those are both serious mental health disorders that totally disrupt normal thinking. But Ricky, despite being encouraged by his friends and family to go get help, never got help for any of his psychological issues. And so Ricky's life had kind of gone off the rails. He had dropped out of high school and not gone back to any sort of schooling, and he had spent some time in jail. Now, Ricky was living in a low-income, very dangerous part of St. Louis, which is a big Midwestern city on the Mississippi River that in 1999 had a very serious issue with gang violence. Ricky absolutely hated it there, but he had no way to actually leave St. Louis. In fact, Ricky didn't even have his own place. He bounced around from his mother's place, his aunt's place, and his girlfriend's place. Ricky did work, but the work was very sporadic, and it was for the most part just night shifts for random odd jobs. And when Ricky was actually working, he really just spent his time chain smoking cigarettes and drinking literally gallons of coffee. Back at the ER, Ricky, who was still in the exam room, had only been there for less than an hour when the doctor came back in and told Ricky that he was okay and he was going to be discharged. Now, Ricky immediately said, no, I have to be here tonight. I need to stay here. You need to admit me. But the doctor just kind of ignored what he said and handed him the discharge paperwork. 15 minutes later, when a nurse came back into the exam room to get this paperwork from Ricky, she would walk in and see Ricky still sitting on the exam bed, kind of fidgeting around, looking down at this paperwork on his lap that immediately she saw he had not filled out. He had just signed his name at the bottom. And when she walked in, Ricky looked up at her and he kind of shrugged his shoulders and looked at her and was like, "I don't know how to read or write. Can you help me?" And so the nurse immediately felt bad for Ricky. I mean, he's got dirty clothes on, he looks thin and frail, he's clearly very down on his luck, there's some issues happening with this guy, and he can't even fill out his discharge paperwork. And so she said, no problem. She sat down with him, and together they filled out his paperwork. And then afterwards, when she walked him out of the exam room back to the front of the hospital, Ricky turned to her and said, instead of going home, can you just let me stay here in the lobby just for tonight? And this nurse, who knew she was not allowed to do this, she looked around and saw it was not a busy night there. And so she said, okay, as long as you don't bother anyone, you can stay here. And so Ricky thanked her repeatedly. And
that's why I'm thinking he's needing a place to stay, and he don't know where to go for because he don't have any money. Basically homeless. Don't have anything. 51. Family ain't helping you out. You know what I'm saying? You said what?
41.
Yeah, I said 41.
You said 51.
Did I say 51?
Yeah.
I meant 41. At 41, you don't have any, you ain't got family.
No one stable. Because the people that you are, maybe sleeping on their couch or whatever, because he said his girlfriend and
But they ain't wanting you to be there long term. And they get out
every day, stuff like that. So, yeah.
So, is that possibly why he wanted to be admitted to the hospital? Or did he feel as though maybe he owed somebody some money?
But what's the looking around and the
That's what I'm saying. I said maybe he owed somebody some money, somebody threatening him.
Yeah.
And he's needing somewhere safe. Because one of the places a lot of people deem is safe is a hospital. You got a lot of eyes around. You got security there.
Yeah.
Nobody can really just get access to you immediately. So if nobody really knows you at the hospital, maybe he feels as though he's safe for the night.
Yeah.
So maybe he's looking for a safety net, or he's looking for someone to stay for the night.
Yeah.
I don't know. It could be a sample of both.
She said, okay, as long as you don't bother anyone, you can stay here. And so Ricky thanked her repeatedly and then walked over to the corner, kind of far away from the front desk and far away from the front door. And he sat down and folded his arms, and then he just stared at the front door. And so this nurse assumed that Ricky actually must be homeless, especially based on, how he came in and how he was acting. And so she figured, he needs a place that's warm to stay tonight. And so the nurse went back to her station, and over the course of the next several hours, she would periodically look out into the lobby, expecting to see Ricky kind of curled up asleep in the corner. But every time she looked out there, Ricky was still sitting upright, arms folded, staring at the front door of the hospital as if he was expecting someone to come in at any moment and he needed to be ready. And so she thought this was unusual, but she decided not to intervene. She just let him sit there and do his thing. Later that morning, at 11:30 a.m., when the nice nurse who had allowed Ricky to stay in the lobby was leaving her shift, another crew of nurses came in, and right away they noticed Ricky was just sitting in the corner for no apparent reason. And when they walked up to him to ask if he was okay, what are you doing here? What can we do for you? Ricky, instead of trying to talk to any of these nurses, just got up and walked out of the hospital. After leaving the hospital, Ricky walked to a nearby payphone and he called his girlfriend, Sandy. And when Sandy picked up the phone, she immediately recognized her boyfriend's very familiar voice, but she also picked up that he sounded really tired and kind of out of it. And so when she asked him, are you okay? What's going on? Ricky would tell her that he had just spent the night in the hospital. But he didn't clarify that he had spent the night in the lobby of the hospital, not admitted as a patient at the hospital. But to Sandy, it really didn't matter because already this was raising red flags for her because this was actually the second time that Ricky had gone to the ER just that week. Just a few days earlier, Ricky had been released from a different hospital in St. Louis after telling doctors there that he had had these chest pains and he couldn't breathe. And so he had been admitted for a couple of days, but ultimately they determined that there really was nothing wrong with him. And they too believed whatever was happening with him had to be psychological. And so he had been released. Additionally, Sandy had been growing increasingly worried about Ricky because over the last several weeks, Ricky had begun acting really paranoid to the point where anytime he was in her apartment and somebody outside the apartment just walked down the hallway, Ricky would jump as if he was worried whoever was out there was going to barge in at any moment. But whenever Sandy asked Ricky, what's going on? Why are you so paranoid? He refused to elaborate. So, feeling very concerned about Ricky, on this phone call, Sandy would say to Ricky, please come to my apartment and let me take care of you. If you're not feeling well, I'll make you feel better. Just please come to my apartment right now. But Ricky said no, he did not want to go to Sandy's apartment. He told her instead he was going to walk to a nearby gas station to get a bite to eat, and then afterwards he would give Sandy a call. And so the two of them agreed to this plan. They hung up. But then Ricky did not call Sandy later.
Is it possibly he doesn't want any just how some homeless people are where they I don't want no handouts. I don't want sometimes they just want a place to crash for the night and they I get on my feet and I go. Mm-hmm. You get what I mean?
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Because typically I ain't gonna hold you if I'm in Ricky's position and my girlfriend say come.
You going?
Yeah. So what we said earlier probably is not the case that people didn't want him to be there that long. He probably on his end didn't want to feel like he's embarking on people.
Get a burden to someone or something.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed to this plan. They hung up. But then Ricky did not call Sandy later. A worker at the gas station where Ricky said he was going would later tell authorities that Ricky did come into the gas station and he got a hot dog on that day, the 26th. And then the next day, this same worker said, yep, we saw Ricky again on the 27th. He came in here, he got a bite to eat, and then he left. But after that, nobody saw Ricky. Not his aunt, not his mom, not his girlfriend. He didn't show up in any other emergency rooms in Missouri. He just disappeared. On June 30th, so 3 days after Ricky was last seen at this gas station, a woman was driving her car 20 miles north of St. Louis on this highway when she looked out into this cornfield that butted up against the highway, and she saw kind of in the middle of it was this dark shape that looked totally out of place. And so she was intrigued enough that she actually pulled over on the road, she got out, and began walking into this cornfield to see what this thing was. And when she got up to this thing and saw what it was, she froze in horror, and then she screamed, turned around, and ran back to her car, and she flew to the nearest gas station, she grabbed a payphone, and she called 911. When the police arrived at this cornfield, they too walked out towards this dark thing, and then finally they saw what this thing was that had scared this woman. It was a dead person who was lying face down. Their body was very badly decomposed. And in fact, their body was just kind of falling apart, like the fingers of this person's body had just kind of crumpled off of their hands. Now, based on what this person was wearing, they appeared to be male, but there was no way to tell how this person died or really how long they had been dead for. But despite the advanced decomposition, authorities were able to get a good fingerprint, and it would turn out that this body belonged to Ricky McCormick. The day after Ricky's body was found, the police would come out and say they were treating his death as a homicide. This area along this highway in this cornfield was actually a fairly common place for murderers to dump their victims. And it was very unlikely that Ricky had gotten there by himself. He didn't have a car. In fact, he didn't even have a driver's license. There was no public transportation that could have brought him to this spot. And if Ricky had decided to walk to this area for some reason, it was a solid 15 miles from where he lived and worked. Also, Ricky's body was way too decomposed relative to when he had last been seen alive, just 3 days earlier. And so there was a theory that perhaps he was killed somewhere else and then kept indoors in heat, and that had accelerated his decomposition, and then at some point whoever had killed him had moved his body and dumped it in this cornfield.
Because sometimes people do that type of stuff, you know what I'm saying, where they either heat the body in a heated area to speed up the decomposition process, or keep it in a cooler to slow down the decomposition of the body, so you really can't tell when the body was, you know what I'm saying? Or also some people do it so you won't be able to tell how the person was killed. So 15 miles away in a cornfield, that's like rant. And what made this woman want to pull over and walk into a cornfield? Are you that damn nosy?
I guess whatever it was, she was intrigued by it, and she was on the way to see. Maybe it's a good thing she did, but I do wonder what. Like, I understand you was like, oh, something out there that looks unfamiliar or out of place, but
I ain't gonna lie, I done passed about a lot of cornfields. I'm not getting out. I'm not stopping the car, and I'm not getting out. Personally,
I feel you.
I don't like, even if something is out there, I'm like, oh, okay. Would you?
So on that first day of the homicide investigation, July 1st, the police put 18 detectives, so a ton of detectives, on this case, and they also appealed to the public to come forward if you had any information about what could have happened to Ricky McCormick. But just a day later, on July 2nd, the police came out and made an announcement that, after looking at all the evidence and looking at Ricky's body again, it did not appear, in fact, that he had been murdered, but instead he must have died of natural causes. This is a guy that had lung and heart problems, and so that is likely what killed him. Case closed. And so after this announcement, all of the evidence in Ricky's case was bundled up, put into storage, and people just kind of forgot about it.
I hate situations like that. Because, the detectives, y'all go out. First off, y'all say it's a homicide. Then now is, we just spoke to the family. He has been reported that he went to the hospital a couple times. Complain about this and complain about these situations. Then you follow up with the police, not with the police, but with the hospital. Oh, what he come in here for? Oh, y'all treated him for this and this and this. Oh, it's a possibility he was walking, got it. You know what I'm saying?
Probably heat exhaustion.
Heat exhaustion. June, but I don't think it happens that fast, and I don't believe the body go into belly decomposition within 3 days of the last time somebody seen him. You get what I mean? The last time somebody seen him was June 27th, and he was found June 30th. And the way y'all saying the body is barely decomposed, the cornfield ain't that goddamn hot. I know it's open to the sun, open exposure.
But if he was left somewhere else, in a heated house or a shed or something, then possibly, that's just from experience, but possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, not experience of keeping a body in the shed or nothing, but...
You said actually being there. Like actually being inside of a heated shed or...
No, I'm saying just like with my uncle, per se, in his house, and it had only been like 3 or 4 days, and his body...
Oh, you saying that situation.
When he died, yeah. And his body was only in the house for about 3 or 4 days from the last time he talked to my grandma, from the time my uncle found him. Yeah. And it was his body was badly decomposed. Like, for his funeral, we had to close casket.
6 months later, the Federal Bureau
Sorry.
put into storage, and people just kind of forgot about it. 6 months later, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, got a tip that involved Ricky McCormick. They were working on a case in St. Louis, Missouri about this major drug dealer who apparently was ordering hits on his rivals, and a confidential informant came forward and told the FBI that this guy, Ricky McCormick, had gotten wrapped up with this major drug dealer. But they didn't really know what role Ricky was playing with this drug dealer. It was just kind of a rumor on the street that, Ricky was involved somehow. This did not make any sense to the FBI because they're thinking, why would this big-time drug dealer who really was a mover and shaker in St. Louis get involved with this guy, Ricky McCormick, who was obviously deeply mentally ill and borderline homeless? I mean, what role could Ricky play for this drug dealer? But the FBI still did follow up on this tip because it was very credible. And when they spoke to the local police who had investigated Ricky's death, they got Ricky's file, which meant they got all of the evidence. And immediately, the FBI realized the local police had overlooked a very strange piece of evidence found in Ricky's pocket. This strange evidence was quickly sent to FBI headquarters in Quantico, Virginia, and it landed on the desk of a forensic analyst named Dan Olson. Dan was relatively new to the FBI, but he was highly disciplined and very methodical. And so when he received this piece of evidence, he got to work right away trying to figure out what it was, what it meant in relationship to Ricky and this drug dealer, and, maybe does it answer the question of how these people are connected? But despite his best efforts in calling in the experts and using every computer program to analyze this evidence, he just could not figure out what it meant. At the same time that Dan was doing this, the big drug dealer who was the target of that big FBI investigation in St. Louis was arrested on gun and drug charges, and so the big case was now over. And suddenly, trying to figure out what connection Ricky McCormick had to this drug dealer was kind of irrelevant, because the drug dealer was behind bars and Ricky was already dead. And so the FBI kind of put a pause on trying to figure out what this evidence was. And so Dan, even though he was really curious now, he was fully invested in trying to figure out what this thing was, he realized he had to give it up too and move on to something else. And so the strange evidence went back into storage, and once again, everyone just kind of moved on from Ricky McCormick. But Dan never really forgot about this mystifying piece of evidence. It was always in the back of his mind. 22 years later, Dan Olson had now become very senior at the FBI. He was actually in charge of their cryptanalysis.
Well, things like this do be happening though. Like you have your drug dealer possibly for one case. And then once y'all get like evidence to lock them up on a serious case, that y'all like deemed that okay, we can put them away.
Or like some sort of suspect. What you say?
Basically, what I'm saying, I've seen something like this happen before with my stepbrother. My stepbrother, remember, he got shot in the head. They needed him, like the police in where he got shot at, needed him because they were all working for this big gang leader there. And they needed him to be able to testify and say, yes, he is the one. Because, bro, everybody presumed you dead. Like, he was in the hospital, unidentifiable. Nobody knew nothing. He states away, everything. Another guy died. They left him in the car. His because he was the one basic reason why my stepbrother didn't die. He got shot, but he ended up dying from his shot. And his shot is the one that went into my brother's head, stepbrother's head. So that's the reason why the bullet slowed down, which was able to keep him alive. But the other boy that actually got the initial shot, he died, and he was left stranded in an apartment complex in a parking lot. And they found his body like a month later, badly decomposed in a car. But they needed him. They needed my stepbrother to testify. He didn't want to because he was afraid. And he was like, and they knew he was afraid, but they ended up getting him on other charges. And y'all could have got him still on this murder charge because y'all sent them because they were minors at the time. You see him to go do a robbery. One dies, one shot, one wounded because of it. You know what I'm saying? So they needed him on some gang shit. But they didn't get him on that. They got him on other charges. So they said, "Oh, okay,
they didn't get him on a murder. They got him on some other charges."
Yeah, they were like, we don't need you anymore. And so he like, oh, okay, like good. I don't gotta. But I'm like, it's kind of like y'all not caring though, caring about solving and getting justice for people who might want that justice to be served.
Was it because they didn't really have much as far as like your stepbrother situation and his friend or whatever, because he didn't want to testify?
They went back to testify. Like once he was healed enough to talk and everything, they went back to testify, and he was gonna take the stand. He literally was at the court, and then we don't need you anymore. We was able to. He took a plea deal, and I'm like, what the fuck, like.
But y'all could have got him on a little bit even more bigger,
yeah.
you know. But okay.
But that's police though.
Defining piece of evidence. It was always in the back of his mind. 22 years later, Dan Olson had now become very senior at the FBI. He was actually in charge of their cryptanalysis and racketeering unit. Basically, he was in charge of the people at the FBI who specialized in code breaking, meaning they were the people that would pull any sort of secret messages embedded inside of evidence. And so at some point after taking over this unit, Dan pulled out of storage this strange piece of evidence connected to Ricky McCormick. And he said, you know what? I just need to know what this means. I have to figure it out. I've never been able to. It's haunted me ever since. And so Dan went public. He went to the media and he asked the world to take a look at this mystifying piece of evidence and come forward if you have any idea what it means. When Ricky was discovered in that cornfield, the local police quickly emptied his pockets. And in his pants pocket were 2 documents that contained an incredibly complex cipher or code. It was basically 30 lines on each piece of paper with different symbols and letters and capital letters. I mean, it looked like total gibberish to the untrained eye. But to people like Dan and his code-breaking team, these symbols and letters could mean there was a secret message hidden inside of these documents if you could break the code system. But of course, no one could ever break that code. So how in the world does a guy like Ricky, who is basically functionally illiterate and can only write his name, he's clearly mentally ill and he's not really in touch with reality all the time, how does a guy like that come to be in possession of these complex ciphers? And if he didn't write these ciphers, because that's possible, maybe somebody else gave them to Ricky, well, why would anyone who came up with this very complex cipher entrust a guy like Ricky to be the one to carry these things around? I mean, presumably, they contain confidential information that's been very carefully hidden inside of the cipher. And so why give it to Ricky? He's such a liability. And also, what happened to Ricky in that cornfield? I mean, we don't even know how he got there. We don't know how he was killed. All we know is that he had these ciphers in his pocket when he was found. And so many people believe, including law enforcement, that the answer to, what happened to Ricky and what was his connection to this drug lord in St. Louis, if any, or, what was he up to, will all be solved if we can just figure out what these 2 ciphers mean. But as of right now, no one has solved the riddle of what these 2 ciphers mean. All we know is that Ricky McCormick, a couple of weeks before he died, became increasingly paranoid and was so scared of someone or something that he was likely running into these hospitals just to hide out. But eventually, whoever or whatever Ricky was scared of very likely caught up to him and killed him. But until we crack these ciphers, we very likely will have no idea what actually happened to Ricky McCormick. Today, the FBI has set up a special website where you can look at these 2 ciphers that Ricky had in his pocket, and if you're able to crack them, because someone's going to eventually, you can tell the FBI through this website and potentially help solve Ricky's murder. To go to this FBI website, click the link in the description below. So that's going to do it. If you enjoyed today's story and you want to hear more stories,
that's crazy, bro.
That is crazy.
In all honesty, 100%, I believe he was murdered. He was murdered. I would need to know more about the guy that supposedly was involved with his murder, like the game, or whoever the drug guy is. need to know a little bit more about him, because if he's just a petty drug dealer, he ain't making no moves like that. But if he a big nigga, you know what I'm saying, like a big boss in the community, that somebody like, just to throw out a name like Meech. Mm-hmm. If you on that high level to the point where, or like a Craig Pettis, or like, you know what I'm saying, like these big drug dealers who could possibly have like some mafia type stuff happen to you, where people gonna kill you, but they gonna kill you in a certain way, or like Bumpy Johnson type shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm saying like on that type of level, you do have drug dealers like that, but then you have some of those local drug dealers who only thing they do is trying to shoot you real quick. But could he possibly have wanted to snitch, knew some information?
Well, I'm just trying to figure out if, because I do feel like it was, a homicide, just a hunch. I mean, I don't know, but what would have caused, like,
then he find them notes, and that's what he been holding on the whole time.
But what caused his death, though?
I'm saying he could have found that note, whatever that riddle, that note, that cipher, and somebody who possibly wanted it from him, but you would have ransacked his pockets, you would have knew he had those notes.
Right, I'm asking what possibly caused him his death, not who caused it, how. Because obviously y'all didn't find like a gun.
I'm saying he was murdered, possibly torturally murdered. I believe you can sit somebody literally inside of a hot building and and they could slowly die off of heat exhaustion fast. If you know how to.
Right, I'm not debunking it. If that's what you say, okay, then that's one reason. Maybe how. I'm asking like how possibly, because they didn't find like any stab wounds or gunshot or blunt force trauma, like nothing like that. Could it have been like a prick or something, like a needle? Something
could have been a serial killer.
Could have been something like that's what I'm asking. I'm like asking like how did he die? Like I do feel like it was a homicide, but the fact that they didn't find any physical evidence to put that it was a homicide, that's why they ruled it as just natural causes.
This is a popular field that like Ballen said, people have dumped dead bodies in this field before, so that's already an alert. Like nowadays, if something happened like that, I would most definitely put up a street camera to be able to catch some stuff, because that's the reason why I say nowadays I don't think we don't have as much like that type of stuff that goes on because of technology. You know what I'm saying? The investment technology. Not saying this stuff don't go on, but I'm saying as much as, because we do deal with a lot of kidnappings for some reason. We can't never get them solved, which is so weird. Or are people wanting to solve them? That's the other question. But with this situation, it seems kind of like a cover-up as well, with how quick the local police, was able to kind of want to brush off the case and rule it as, oh, he just died. 15 minutes away, you dumped in a popular field.
Miles.
I mean, right, 15 miles. I got the notes, but 15 miles away from where you live, so that's in the outskirts in the country. Somebody dump you in a field that's popular for people to dump dead bodies in. You don't just walk and I die in the field that's, you know what I'm saying? It's already popular for that, so we're gonna automatically categorize yours with that. I just don't see him doing that.
Yeah, I feel you.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and another reason why he didn't possibly go to his girlfriend's house and take in her offer of helping him, and he's bouncing from place to place because he possibly know he has a target on his back, and he doesn't want any of his family and friends to be involved with whatever he got himself involved with. So it's like a low key protection of them. Like, hey, I really don't want to be in that much communication with y'all because I don't want anything happening to y'all. I'm calling y'all from a payphone instead of me trying to meet it, because I know where y'all live. I can just walk up on you if I need. I'm keeping my distance away from family and friends. I'm going to public places where I'm trying to get admitted to the hospital because I need to be safe. Everything shows like
that someone possibly was after him.
Somebody's after him. It's so many red flags that says, hey, he's somebody, and then for him to stay up all night
watching a door.
Watching a door in a corner where 9 times out of 10 he got his back to the wall. Because that's a survivor technique. You got to be able to have a viewpoint of the entrance and the exit, and you don't want anybody to be able to sneak from you from behind. So I 100% believe that he was murdered. I think, like a lot of other cases, the police dropped the ball. Don't want to put any time and resources into it. We've seen that a lot with Mr. Ballen videos, where the police constantly drop the ball. And it is what it is. If you feel some type of way, hey, that's on you. It's plain as day. But, or is it possibly that this Riddle has nothing to do with his death?
I mean, it possibly could. Who knows? But, or it could just be gibberish, and that's why they can't crack it. Like, especially since before, because I'm thinking about even at the hospital, he was only able to write his name, and she had to have him fill out the papers because of whatever. I'm like, is he just writing any and everything because he really don't know how to, like,
to write,
you know, or whatever the case may be, or he just whatever he's under, or the stress, or whatever he's going through is causing him to not be able to, like, be, you know, very coherent. You know, I don't know.
True.
Like, it could be nothing, or it could be something.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure whatever his name was, I can't remember.
Dan.
It was a Dan.
Yeah.
Dan. Sorry, Dan. If he's still, well, that was a long. Well, if Dan's still, anyway, but
99, girl, you partied like in 1999.
But he was already older, and he was like 22 years later.
22 years later is recently.
But I don't know how old he was at the time.
But I'm saying if 22 years later he put it now, that's just 2021.
Was that 2021?
Yeah.
What if he's still alive? Things could have happened between, you know.
No, it could have been, 22 years later. Yeah, 2021.
That's 2021. Yeah. But, you know, I don't know folks' life. Something could have happened between. But anyway, with Dan, because he's like, this is what I do. And I know it's eating him up the fact that he cannot crack it. Because I'll be the same way.
And it could be literally, like you said, like, gibberish.
Yeah, it could just be.
And that's the reason why you cannot
I'll be one of them people, like, I'm not retiring until I crack this up.
Nah, I ain't going to do that. Nah.
Yeah, I'm going to go home. I'm going to retire and go home and then be at home trying to figure it out. Because that's just like, I don't know. But it could be nothing. But it could be
what
something.
actually breaks the case wide open.
Yeah. And
you find out every information. You even find out information you probably weren't even supposed to find out.
True.
Or I would like to actually see what the actual paper is. Is it written down on a paper that he possibly... Well, I'm sure somebody would have identified if it was his handwriting.
True. They could have...
So...
Yeah,
it might not be his handwriting, so if it ain't his handwriting...
That would have been a good thing to try to match and see if it was, or...
If he is schizo, and it's, you know what I'm saying, and it is something that just drastically happened to him himself, I do believe with people with multiple personality disorders, a personality might take over and your handwriting skills change, and your behavior changes, you know what I'm saying? So, who knows, man?
I just hate that... You know, nothing more was actually done. Especially if, you know, they thought at first it was a homicide, or if it is a homicide.
And so how quickly they just, ain't no homicide.
Yeah, or that if it was a homicide, the fact that, you know, nothing was really done, it could, I mean...
You gonna try to crack the code?
I do want to go on there. I ain't gonna try to, I just want to go look.
Yeah,
I was trying to not be nosy. I just really want to go look and just see, like in front of me. For real.
Yeah.
But now if he couldn't crack it, if Dan couldn't crack it, I know I ain't gonna ever crack it.
And honestly, sometimes it takes those people.
I don't do that.
You know, sometimes it'll take a person who don't do it to be able to crack it. Because their mind
maybe they overthinking or thinking more than
Yeah. You need to send it to that group of nerds. Remember that the ones who they do the riddles, and they one of Mr. Ballen videos we did, and he ended up putting the stuff in the Coca-Colas, and they all started drinking it. And best way how to get away with murder, they would see geniuses. That. Take it to them. They might crack it.
They probably could crack it. Who knows?
Because they almost got away with that. Almost. But hey, man, make sure y'all spam us up. Y'all let us know y'all thoughts and opinions in the comments. I really don't I believe it's a homicide. I believe that they're very far away from figuring out what actually happened to him. But my thing is, what would be the motive? If we can find a true motive of why somebody would want to hurt Ricky, I think most definitely we'll be able to solve it.
Right.
What?
No, I was just about to say, I definitely do think it's a homicide, because I was sitting here thinking, I was like, it couldn't possibly be no one gave him a ride, because this is a weird area, right? And somebody would have came forth and been like, I gave him a ride, you know, to such point.
He just ain't, you know what I'm saying, the way he moving.
Yeah.
He
and then I'm trying to think of the distance from walking from the store from someone last seeing him from here, and how long
3 days. 3 days. Well, technically not even a full 3 days. It's the 27th last time he was seen, and the 30th his body was found, badly decomposed. So 28th, 29th, 30th he found.
So it would have something would have had to happen
on the 27th,
and then
28th, or did something happen? Did he get picked up? Did somebody find him on the 27th? Badly tortured him on the by the 28th he died, and.
Well, just did something to him, because we don't know, because you keep saying it, but we don't know exactly what. So we'll just say something was done. Yeah, if we're going with that. But I don't know. I was just thinking. But
that's crazy, man. A bad way to go out, too. But hey, man, again, spam us up. Y'all let us know y'all thoughts and opinions. I do believe he was murdered. If y'all got an idea or anything else, y'all let us know in the comments, man. But as always, y'all know how it go, man. I do go by the name DJ Kid. This is.
Had to go and get it, ain't no time to kick it. Got a stack of flip for my foes.